Nobody explains how strange building wealth actually feels, because for a very long time, it feels like nothing is happening. You work consistently, you save money, you invest when you can, you try to make smarter financial decisions, and yet your daily life barely changes. You still think carefully before purchases, you still feel pressure from normal expenses, you still feel far away from real financial freedom. That disconnect becomes psychologically dangerous, because humans naturally expect effort to create visible results. Go to the gym consistently, eventually you see physical progress. Practice a skill, you become noticeably better. Work longer hours, you usually earn more money. But wealth building behaves differently. For years, progress can feel emotionally invisible, and most people are completely unprepared for that reality. That's why so many individuals quit before wealth finally starts behaving like wealth, not because they're lazy, because the timeline feels wrong, and the internet makes this much worse. Online, wealth always looks immediate. Someone doubled their portfolio overnight. Someone retired at 32. Someone bought a Lamborghini at 24. Someone claims they became financially free in 18 months. So subconsciously, people begin expecting wealth to feel exciting very quickly. But real wealth creation usually feels quiet in the beginning, sometimes painfully quiet. And quiet progress is difficult to stay emotionally committed to, especially when everyone around you appears to be moving faster. That's the psychological battle nobody explains properly. Because the hardest phase of building wealth is the phase where your effort is real, but the rewards still feel small. Think about how strange this actually is. If someone spends $400 going out this weekend, they feel the result immediately. The experience is visible, social, emotional. But if someone invests $400 this month, their life barely changes at all. Nobody congratulates them. Nothing looks different. There's no emotional reward yet. That difference quietly shapes human behavior. One decision feels rewarding now, the other feels meaningful later. And most people underestimate how psychologically difficult later actually is. The beginning of wealth building is usually the most frustrating phase, because technically, progress is happening. But emotionally, it barely feels real. Imagine someone who starts investing seriously for the first time. Maybe they save $200 a month, then eventually $500, maybe later $800. Objectively, that matters. But subjectively, their life still feels mostly the same. They still wake up early, still work long hours, still pay bills, still feel financial pressure. And when people don't feel progress, motivation becomes fragile. That's where dangerous thoughts begin appearing. This isn't enough. I'm too late. The amount is too small. I need faster results. That's usually the moment people become vulnerable to financial mistakes, because slow progress creates emotional impatience, and emotional impatience is where people begin chasing speculation, shortcuts, high-risk trades, or unrealistic promises, not necessarily because they're irrational, because they want proof their effort matters. That's important to understand. Most people are not addicted to money itself, they're addicted to visible progress. And in the early stages, wealth building hides progress extremely well, especially because humans think linearly. But wealth doesn't grow linearly forever. At first, the progress looks almost flat. Then eventually, the same habits start creating dramatically different results. That's why consistency matters so much early on. Not because the rewards are exciting immediately, because consistency keeps you alive long enough to eventually reach momentum. Imagine two people in their 20s. The first person spends most extra income improving current lifestyle, better apartment, better restaurants, better vacations, more expensive routines everywhere. The second person quietly builds assets. At first, the first person looks far more successful. Their life feels exciting, visible, impressive. The second person often feels behind emotionally, because investing rarely looks impressive in the beginning. But then something changes years later. The first person becomes trapped maintaining an expensive lifestyle. The second person slowly gains flexibility. Less panic, less pressure, more options. That's when wealth starts becoming emotionally visible, not through luxury, through reduced stress. 30 years ago, building wealth looked boring. and people expected it to look boring. Now, everything online makes wealth look immediate: fast profits, fast cars, fast success, fast freedom. So normal progress starts feeling invisible, even when it's actually working. That comparison destroys motivation for a lot of people, because they compare their real financial life to someone else's highlight reel. And highlight reels are dangerous psychologically. Nobody posts years of consistency, boring investing, saying no to purchases, slow progress, or ordinary financial discipline. People post outcomes, not timelines. That creates a completely distorted expectation of wealth. Once someone believes progress should feel dramatic quickly, normal wealth building starts feeling emotionally disappointing. That's why so many people quit systems that were actually working, not because the strategy failed, because the timeline didn't feel exciting enough. One of the weirdest modern financial experiences is realizing your paycheck disappeared again, not on something crazy, just life, bills, food, subscriptions, a few normal purchases, maybe one unexpected expense, and suddenly the number is gone again. A lot of people haven't experienced money staying in their account long enough to even feel momentum yet. That's why the first signs of wealth feel so emotional. Not because you bought something expensive, because for the first time, your money didn't instantly vanish. Eventually, something strange starts happening. Your money begins helping you. At first, this effect is tiny, almost invisible. Then one day you notice something important. Your investments moved more in 1 month than your monthly contribution. That moment changes people psychologically, because for the first time, wealth stops feeling entirely dependent on labor. Now your existing capital starts participating. That shift matters enormously. Because before this phase, everything depends mostly on effort. After this phase, momentum starts contributing too, and momentum changes motivation dramatically. People often think wealth creates confidence automatically. Usually confidence appears after momentum becomes visible. That's when small financial habits finally feel intelligent, long-term thinking starts feeling rewarding, and progress stops feeling fake. The person realizes, I'm no longer starting from zero every month. That realization is powerful. Because psychologically, constantly starting from zero is exhausting. Momentum changes the emotional experience of money completely. And this is exactly the phase most people never reach, because they quit during the invisible years. There's a moment people rarely talk about. The moment money stops controlling every tiny decision. You stop calculating every purchase in your head. You stop feeling anxiety before checking your bank account. Unexpected expenses become annoying instead of catastrophic. And weirdly, that feeling is more exciting than most luxury purchases. Because peace feels different when you spent years without it. That's one of the first real emotional rewards of wealth building, and it usually arrives much earlier than people expect. One of the biggest misconceptions about wealth building is the belief that only massive financial decisions matter. In reality, wealth is often shaped more by repeated behaviors than dramatic moments. Not because small decisions are magical individually, because repeated behaviors become trajectories. For example, someone who upgrades lifestyle every time income rises may accidentally trap themselves financially for years, not through recklessness, through gradual normalization. Meanwhile, someone else increases investments slowly while keeping lifestyle growth controlled. At first, the difference feels tiny. 5 or 10 years later, the difference becomes enormous. That's how compounding actually feels in real life, not explosive, accumulated, quietly accumulated. And this applies beyond investing. It affects stress levels, career flexibility, risk tolerance, housing decisions, future opportunities, and overall emotional stability. Wealth building is not only about numbers, it's about becoming harder to destabilize over time. That's a very different goal than simply appearing successful. Because fragile wealth creates pressure, stable wealth creates options, and options change how people experience life psychologically. Imagine 2 people both earning good salaries. The first person upgrades life constantly: more expensive apartment, car payments, luxury subscriptions, higher spending everywhere. The second person upgrades life more slowly while protecting margin aggressively. 5 years later, both may appear successful externally, But internally, their lives feel completely different. One person feels trapped maintaining income. The other feels increasingly difficult to destabilize. That's real financial progress. Not looking rich, becoming resilient. A lot of people think wealth building means becoming rich quickly. Usually the first real win is smaller than that. The first real win is when life stops resetting you every few months. One expense no longer destroys your progress. One mistake no longer creates panic. One difficult month no longer sends you back to zero. That's when people finally feel movement, not because they became rich, because they finally stopped rebuilding constantly. And honestly, that changes people more than they expect, because financial stress is exhausting, not only financially, mentally. When every setback feels dangerous, life starts feeling heavy. That's why one of the biggest signs of financial progress is psychological. Less panic, less urgency, less fear around normal problems. People think the first signs of wealth are material. Usually they're emotional. The timeline of wealth building feels emotionally unfair. That's the truth. The hardest years often happen before rewards become visible. You work, save, invest, stay consistent, and externally, your life may not look dramatically different for a long time. That phase destroys many people psychologically, because humans want evidence their effort matters. But wealth building often rewards people later than expected. And yet the people who eventually build meaningful wealth usually have one thing in common. They survive the invisible phase. They continue long enough for momentum to finally appear. That's why wealth building is not only mathematical, it's psychological. Because eventually, if consistency survives long enough, pressure decreases, options increase, fragility weakens, flexibility grows. And one day, you realize something surprising. Wealth was never only about becoming rich. It was about slowly gaining control over your future. What part of building wealth feels hardest to you right now? The waiting, the consistency, or feeling like progress is too slow? Comment it below, and if you want more videos about money, psychology, investing, and long-term wealth building, subscribe. I'll see you in the next video. And if you enjoyed this one, you'll probably find the videos on your screen helpful too.